Hello everyone, welcome to the Chandler-Gilbert Community College Hopes and Fears series. It is Tuesday, October 27th, and many of you know we are a week away from a very monumentous election. Today, we're going to continue here with our fifth panel, our fifth series, where we're talking about civic engagement, and we have our Black leadership through our community, through our campus, here to present their experiences, discuss their hopes, discuss their fears. For those of you who have joined us a few times now, you know that the spirit of this conversation is to have kind of a kitchen table conversation, right? A round table around what are some of the things that are on our mind? Well, what are some of the ways that we're taking care of ourselves, getting tongue-tied, y'all. What are some of the ways we're taking care of ourselves? And what are some of our concerns and also the things that are bringing us hope during these really difficult times? I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves right after I mention myself. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Dr. Enjolie Lafaurie. I'm psychology faculty here at Chandler-Gilbert and also the faculty developer. We're going to have the panelists introduce themselves, but I'm also going to ask them a question about who it is that they represent outside of their professional identity. So I want to model that as well. So when I think about the spaces and the places that I represent, I identify, right, as an Afro-Caribbean woman who's Cuban and Guatemalan. I have a beautiful daughter who is also a student here at Chandler-Gilbert. I'm a Tempe resident, and my Afro-Indigenous background is also particularly important to me. So those intersections of ways that who I am come together is who I think about, right, as I host these panels and as I interact with all of our panelists. I'm going to ask the Collins to introduce themselves first. Y'all can fight it out as far as who wants to go first. But can you give us an introduction of who you are and what are the groups that you represent?
All right, I won rock, paper, scissors. So here I I'm Diona Collins. I am nursing faculty here at Chandler-Gilbert Community College. I represent so many facets of the community. My main goal is to do community outreach and to promote health and wellness within the community, mainly the LGBTQ community, which is one of the main communities that I identify with, and making sure that there is health equality across the board. We have two beautiful Afro-Latino daughters, and they are adult women, go figure. Yeah, I also represent that community as well. And coming off of the end of representing domestic violence, I also am in the middle of representing the women and men who have lived with domestic violence and represent them and help them get their voices out there and watch them and help them with their mental health as they rebuild as well. So.
Hello, my name is Diona Collins, and I represent underserved communities. I also represent veterans as well as wounded service members returning back to society. My purpose is to put power back in people's hands by educating them about healthcare, equity, and how to take control by using resources that they have. A lot of the time, we put the power in other people's hands, like doctors and other medical professionals, when we actually have the power and control. And I feel like it's very important. It's one of the reasons why I kind of changed the trajectory of my life by taking control of my diet, my mental health, and therefore kind of changing the tide. So I feel like that's the community that I serve.
Thank you, Roy. If y'all continue.
Wonderful. Roy Tatum, president of the East Valley NAACP, also president of Vanguard Strategies and Consulting, my own business. And I will say I represent the community, people that need help, people without a voice, people that may not have the knowledge, the know-how, or the muscle to fight. And we've been doing representing people for years now, especially in the Valley, in the East Valley. I've been the president of the East Valley NAACP for the past 4 years. And I also want to just say I represent many of the voices that are in the streets, are in the community. I mean, people that are on the ground, people that have to deal with or navigate the law enforcement or the legal system, or that those that want to engage or be engaged within our political system. And so many times I serve as a conduit between the community and those in the positions of power.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And I guess I'm Corey Woods. I'm the newly elected mayor of Tempe, Arizona. I've been mayor now since July 2nd, so roughly about 4 months. And my thing, I would probably echo what a lot of other folks have said here, is that I represent the community in a very specific sense. You know, the residents of the city of Tempe, all 194,000 of them. But I also believe there's a bigger responsibility being mayor of not just simply being the mayor of your city, but being a regional leader when it comes to the East Valley and all of Maricopa County. Also, you know, from the perspective of being the first African-American mayor of the city of Tempe, I also feel a special responsibility when I talk to, you know, folks in our community that I represent them and that I'm obviously making them proud and pursuing policies that are, you know, good for the African-American community, but also good for the residents of Tempe as a whole. And I find that, unlike what some people will say, those things are not in conflict. The things that we all generally want the same things, and the perspective, we might have different ways of getting to those points, but honestly, the needs of the Black community are very much the needs of the rest of the community. And I'm very fortunate to be a voice, frankly, for all of them. So I'm just excited to be here tonight and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. You know, for all of us, it's just a good reminder of that's who we answer to, but it's, you know, it's who hold us accountable, right? It's who motivates our actions. And it's when we put in those late nights or we do these extra panels, right? For little to nothing except for sharing of information, what motivates us. So thank you for sharing, you know, beyond who you are professionally, who you also are personally. So let's get started with our first question. I would like to kind of ask Roy, if you would start us off, if you could share, what are your hopes? What are your hopes either for yourself, for your community? Please respond to that question.
Well, right now, I'll say I'm very hopeful 7 days out from probably the most consequential election of our lives. And we're seeing record-breaking, not just turnout, but engagement. I was reminded of a video. You know, sometimes Facebook will remind you of things you did a year ago or 2 years ago. Well, 2 years ago today, Tempe opened up early voting, and we were outside of the Tempe History Museum because that's where the polls were. And I was part of the video that I was doing was I just gotten word that we had broken the record for like the amount of early votes that had been cast in the morning. And so just to think of, it was like 400, 400. I'm sure that early voting this time around will probably be 400 in the first hour, And so what I'm saying is I'm excited, I'm hopeful, because I know that engagement is at an all-time high, and this is something that I've spent the majority of my adult life working on: civic engagement, being involved in the political process, having your voice heard. I've worked on 3 presidential campaigns, a number of state and local campaigns. And so I know what it looks like before 2020. But now to see, this is the level of engagement that I've always hoped for. And so I'm hopeful now because I'm hopeful that people will remain engaged. because people will fight. I believe people will win. I believe the voice of the broader community will be successful. I'm going to speak life into this situation right now. And so I believe that we will be successful, and we won't turn back. We won't allow this moment to happen again or duplicate itself. So I'm hopeful at the level of engagement that I'm seeing.
I'm going to invite another panelist, whomever would like to jump in, either the Collins or Mayor Woods, to respond to that question before I ask a few follow-ups.
Roy, I understand your enthusiasm, and I am hopeful about the community engagement as well. Although I'm not nearly invested with the political process, I'm kind of apathetic towards the whole thing of being a former service member, because it's either, to me, it's one of the same, house. So it is what it is. But I feel like the community as a whole is waking up to the power that we actually have, and being able to help each other out, and getting out there and speaking up against things that they, clearly disagree with is a part of that process of gaining power back. And, not being afraid of opposition, and, speaking up and, speaking your mind. So I see where you're coming from.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Because here's my point. I just want to quickly, I'm not just talking about president. I'm talking about people are paying attention to who the county attorney is, who the sheriff is. People are beginning to pay attention. I mean, Adrian Fontes as the county recorder. What we have to remember as well, 4 years ago, 2016, when it was time for us to vote, many people did not get a chance to cast their ballot because the lines were so long. Here and we're talking about here in Maricopa County, in Arizona, that voter suppression was in action. And because we have Adrian Fontes as a county recorder, he's made sure that voting for us is a lot more accessible than it was just 4 years ago. So these are some of the things that I'm talking about as well, not just president. Yes, the president will give that attention, but we're also talking about the local level. I mean, we have right here Tempe's first African-American mayor. And I remember when he announced, I remember when we were talking behind the scenes before he started to run, and about some of the strategies that he needed to employ, because he knew he had an uphill battle. He was popular. People like him. People like you, Corey. But, at the same time, you knew that it was not going to be an easy quest to overcome. And so, but my point is the consciousness of the people. This was March. I remember that was probably like my last public outing before we shut down for COVID in March. Your campaign, your election celebration, I believe that was March 10th.
Well, let's go ahead and bring you in, Corey, right? What are some of your hopes given the way Roy's talking you up?
Well, and he's right, because the funny thing is there are a lot of people who told me that due to COVID-19, my election night party was the last large-scale gathering they were at. It was March 10th. He was totally correct about the date. And then March 16th, I also work at Arizona State University, as I've mentioned before. That was the day that we got the email saying, take your laptop and go home until further notice. So pretty much less than a week later, everything shut down. And so that was the last time people were together in a large crowd, clumped together, hugging each other, kissing each other, and real happy. So I mean, but I agree with Roy when it comes to, first of all, everything he said, but a lot of the down ballot races that he talked about. I mean, as an example, in the city of Tempe, we have 5 questions on for city bonds, $349 million of bond authorization, from everything from public safety to parks to other water infrastructure. And those are the things sometimes people don't make it all the way to the bottom of the ballot or to the other side of the ballot. But the reality is those are the things that actually have the most impact on your daily life, not necessarily the 2 candidates running for president, but whether or not you have clean drinking water, whether or not the trash is getting picked up on time, whether you feel safe in your community. I mean, so all of those things are on the ballot, even just in a city like Tempe coming up in a week from today. And so I'm really happy to see the high levels of engagement we're seeing record-breaking numbers, as Roy talked about, when it comes to early ballots cast. We're seeing a record number of African-American voter turnout as compared to 2016. So that I'm very much pleased with. And just one other quick thing, too, regarding the county recorder's seat, because I think that's very important. The system that everyone talks about right now of the ability to get your ballot in the mail, send your ballot back, know when it was received, and then know when it was counted and the signature was verified, was a system that was put into place, as Roy mentioned, over the last 4 years. So especially now during the time of a pandemic, when people may not feel comfortable going outside and standing in line in very close proximity to other people because of COVID, you have the ability to now get your ballot, mail it back in, and then get a text message and an email alert saying, 1, we have received your ballot, and 2, it has been received and the signature has been verified, which is how I voted 2.5 weeks ago. So I know that the system works, but that was because of an office many times that people don't even think about all the time called Maricopa County Recorder, but it has everything to do with how elections are conducted within the county of Maricopa, which is probably the fastest growing county in the entire country. So those races, not just the top of the ballot, but the down ballot races, bottom of the ballot, back of the ballot, those are critically important. And I'm also glad to see record levels of engagement.
Thank you. It's such good information to know and to keep in mind. Diana, I want to give you the opportunity to jump in here before the guys take over. What are some of your hopes for the Black community?
Some of my hopes, honestly, is that I enjoy seeing the youth come out and be a part of the process. It's so many years that we've seen them, I'm not voting, I'm not doing this, my vote doesn't count. But now their voices, they're loud, they're out there doing it. And that's what I want to see. That's my hope, that doesn't stop. So.
Absolutely. And so as all of you spoke, and Corey, you spoke to this as far as the ways that mail-in ballots are impacting the situation, and we're seeing increasing voter engagement. I was just wondering what you think about this mail-in process. I think there are some people who are concerned about that process. At least they were concerned. Corey, your words are very inspiring. They're telling us that it's working. There's other people who are saying, no, this is the way to go, and it's increasing access and engagement. So what are your thoughts on our process of voting this year?
Speaking specifically about Maricopa County in the state of Arizona, I know there are several states throughout this country that have more recently implemented vote by mail. And so I can't speak to how the systems work in another state. But I can say, one thing that this state does exceptionally well is mail-in voting. We've been doing it for a long time. We're very good at it. We've been frankly recognized by national organizations for how we do it. And the county that we're all sitting in right now, Maricopa, they do an even better job. So I would say that it's a very easy and safe process to vote. And I voted by just simply putting my ballot in a regular mailbox. I didn't walk into a post office and hand it to someone. I didn't actually I went to a regular mailbox and put it in there, and I knew the ballot was picked up and counted and the signature was verified. So I think that people have every reason to believe that the system is functioning well, that the post office is functioning just fine, and that if you do choose to mail your ballot in, it will be received and it will be counted and your voice will be heard.
Thank you. And others of you, what are your thoughts on this? This way that we're voting, that we're being reminded is not new, right? But it's getting more emphasis on this voting by mail system.
If I may just also address it this way as well, I think it's interesting that we just all of a sudden turned into a bit of a political public service announcement. And so somebody may come on and say, hey, I didn't tune in. I wanted to hear about issues and the concerns of the Black community. And I didn't come to hear about a lesson of the, civic engagement and the political service announcements. However, I want to just kind of couch the conversation is this is what has caused a number of people, especially people of color, tremendous amounts of stress over the last 4 years. And for a number of reasons. And so I believe one of the ways empowering one another is by putting information out there. Because whether I go to the barbershop now, whether I'm on a Zoom call or whether I'm in the grocery store, there's some level of a political conversation or a political message being shared. I was in a store, I was running a couple errands, and I actually I saw a guy with a Trump 2020 mask on. And I'm like, how interesting, a Trump 2020 mask. They'll make money off everything. So, but he looked at me, I looked at him, and we just walked past each other. Like no confrontation, but it's like, I see you, you see me, And so the funny thing is that it's everywhere. And so for the next 7 days, I definitely know that it's going to be important for people to truly understand what they're going to embark upon. I will tell some people also, don't watch the news all day, every day. That's a quick tip I'm going to give right now. But as far as the mail-in ballot process, I voted by mail. My ballot was counted. It was ironic because as I was going into, I have a box, and the mailman was walking out, and he saw my ballots in the hand, and he said, and I put it in his hand, and it was like, with all of it's just to kind of think about the issues that's been going on with the post office and the election. It's like, I'm making a change for you, my friend, with my ballot, so to speak. So.
And what I hear in that is like kind of the humanizing aspect of like, it's normalizing this process, and voting should have always been, right? This normalized process that everyone engages in. But in some ways there is something about increased accessibility, right? And you created a great segue, Roy, right? As far as like kind of, okay, well, what does this mean for the Black community? So often we're discussing kind of historical issues of disenfranchisement, and sadly issues that aren't that historical or aren't that far away in history, right? So I think there's we're feeling, at least in our conversation, like the energy and the excitement around the fact that more people will be able to be engaged in this process. Collins, my Collins, I own you all. I in my heart I own you all. So if y'all want to add anything to this conversation? You're good. Okay. Well then, perfect, actually, because now, Daniel, I'm going to ask you something specific. You brought in a sense of apathy, right, that you're experiencing around this voting process. And previous to us coming on, right, I shared with you, I was really candid about that is something that we are hearing from some of our student base about a mix of feelings of anger, and anger specific to the racial injustices, anger specific to maybe a lack of belief about whether or not things can change and whether or not voting matters, right? To all the way ranging to a sense of apathy of, I'm just going to abstain. I'm just going to kind of leave myself out of this system because I don't know if I can actually impact it. Does anyone want to speak to either their experience with that set of emotions or a response to that set of emotions?
I can speak to the set of emotions. I personally have felt apathy since, I would say 2012, to be honest. And my sense of apathy came from the fact that we had a Black president and we still were disenfranchised. So I figured if we had that and we were still disenfranchised, there was really no hope in the traditional system. So to me, I feel like the apathy is speaking more towards searching for options when there aren't any. When you're told that you have to pick the lesser of two evils, but they're still evil, then, somebody who's wise would be like, well, why am I going to choose any of them when I could blaze on my own path? And I guess the closest thing on campus that I could speak of is when the Bernie supporters were really out there and advocating and speaking up. And I had went to quite a few of the meetings to listen to what they had to say. And the undertone that I had gotten from those meetings were, well, if Bernie fails, then we'll go ahead and vote for whoever's Democrat. Well, I felt like, well, that's just settling because, you're out here speaking about socialism or, socialized healthcare, yet and still the same party who, like, is really no difference. So that's where the apathy comes from. And I feel like people should really understand that, especially being in their youth or remembering their youth when they're looking at these kids who are out here who are really trying to speak out or saying, well, now I'm not going to be a part of that, because why do I buy into a system that doesn't even think about me most of the time? Like, they don't think about minimum wage, they don't think about healthcare, they don't think about any of this. So why do I have to care? So I really can speak to that.
Thank you, actually. And so, one, thank you for your honesty, right? Because that's, I think, what I'm sharing about some of the responses from our students are either individual conversations or conversations with maybe somebody in their family, right? So we cannot address an issue if we don't talk about it. So I appreciate you even discussing it. I have one more follow-up, and then before others respond, what calls you back into this process? I mean, so you're describing a level of apathy, but you're also here, right? You're here and engaging us at like a really high level to go on a live, right? So what, besides your wife, what calls you back in?
Frankly, I don't discount the process. I just think that there's a better way that it can be handled. And I feel like hearing the input of everybody who has to participate in it will bring us together, because just ignoring it or blaming others for not voting and not understanding that rationale of thought just puts everybody off, instead of giving them a platform to speak and be like, okay, well, there is a way we can address it, or maybe not. If not, then we can dismantle a system and have one that has a broader vision than just what somebody envisioned 400 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you. And let me let others of you jump in. I feel like you are chomping at the bit. Go for it.
If I may say, because I know where Daniel's coming from, because I'll take it back to 2007, 2008, when one, Barack Obama declared his candidacy for the presidency. He was a long shot running against. I felt compelled to support him because I thought we were running against the machine. He was not taking corporate donors. He was taking small dollar donors. The energy amongst young people was amazing. The energy in the Black community was phenomenal. And so I felt that we were on the verge of a bit of a revolution in the political world, and so that necessarily didn't happen the way we expected it to. And so I know what Daniel's coming from when he talks about the political apathy, because in 2012, I was not as enthused about getting back out there on the campaign. So, I went and I took care of some business. I started doing some things myself. But when I got a chance to meet Bernie Sanders, and so I don't talk as a Bernie Sanders just a supporter. I was an employee of Bernie Sanders. I worked on the national campaign for Bernie Sanders as the deputy director for African American outreach. And so in that, we were literally in the streets, talking to people across the country. And just like Daniel said, I remember talking to a group of young men in Cleveland. They were sitting on the porch. It was the middle of the day. And they pretty much verbatim said the same thing that Daniel said. And I realized that they were not going to vote. I realized that they weren't going to participate. And so I knew that it was going to be a challenge to get Black men, especially young Black men, working age Black men, engaged in the political process, because they saw no one working on policies and programs that would touch them. So I know exactly where Daniel's coming from, because I've had the conversation over and over again. And so one of the things I'll leave with, we constructed the Bernie's racial justice plan, and we began to develop plans to address not just systemic racism, but economic racism and business and entrepreneur support, because many Black men find themselves as entrepreneurs or business owners, not because they're just so talented, because nobody would give them a job. The flat out conversation, nobody would give them a job.
There's so much I could add, but let me let others of you jump in.
I guess what I would probably add is that when it comes to voting, I think that it's a matter of also not just simply voting for someone and then just letting them sort of govern as they choose, but it's also a matter of holding that person accountable. And you can especially do that when it comes to local elections that Roy kind of spoke about earlier. A lot of my days as mayor are spent on the phone with residents. They're not, people who many times supported me. Either they wrote a check or they knocked on doors, or they threw a little house party for me and got their neighborhood excited about me. But those conversations and those relationships did not just simply end on March 10th when I got elected. We are still having conversations about how to actively reshape politics in the city of Tempe. And I recognize that I'm accountable to these folks. I mean, they were people who put their own money or their own personal credibility on the line to back me. And I feel a responsibility to make good on that. But it's partially because we have both made the commitment to one another that I'm going to continue to touch base with them and get their input and feedback when I have to make difficult decisions on things. But also, they communicate with me on a very proactive basis of saying, Corey, here's what I think, or here's what people in my neighborhood are talking about, and what my friend group is saying. So they would ever, even after supporting me, they have a vested interest in holding me accountable and making sure that I'm not just simply, now going off to fancy dinners and hanging out with people who've got a lot of money to throw around, but that say, hey, Corey, you promised us you were going to clean up this park. And if you don't, we're going to make sure to tell everyone that you told us one thing and you didn't do it. So I think it really is incumbent upon those who are voting, especially in local races, to make sure that even if the person that they supported wins, that you continue to keep in touch with that person and then you hold them accountable to fulfill what they talked about in their campaign platform.
I'll share that, one of my hopes is that this time comes around every 4 years as far as the presidential election, right? And so we get a lot more interest, and when we should, as Corey, as you said, when we should have more interest in our local politics. But my hope is that this is the doorway, it's the entryway, right? That it's not just, okay, I voted, I casted my ballot, I'm finished, I get my gold star, but that now I'm going to kind of be engaged in this process and try to participate, because we have been in this year, although we've been shut in and although we've been home, we've also had so much increased participation in civics, period, right? In demonstrating, period. And so I really want to encourage the young people to kind of take that energy and to continue it into the voting process and thereafter.
If I can make a quick comment to those, some of those young people as well, because now is a great time to pay attention and to get engaged. Because as you have new people, there are going to be new people that get elected. There are going to be new people that get elected to the Arizona State House, to the Arizona Senate, to the Board of Supervisors. They're going to be new. There'll probably be a new Arizona Senator with Mark Kelly. My point is, pay attention to all of the newly elected offices, because this gives you an opportunity to reach out to someone that's new. They're going to look for information and input from everywhere. They don't have an already built-in machine. Now is the time to reach out. If you want to be engaged, for anyone, and I'm talking to the person that's not engaged, that may be skeptical of the system, pay attention, but now pay attention to who gets elected in the next 7 days, and make note of who wins, who gets elected. Reach out to them, and just work in your own city, whether it's at the city council level or the sheriff, the mayor, your police chief. Civic engagement is also, police chiefs aren't elected, but they are held accountable to people like the mayor. So you should know who your police chief is. That is an issue that we're all talking about in our community, about dealing with the police. So there are a number of ways to be engaged with community leaders, elected officials, and also our civil servants.
one other quick thing about that, just to follow up, because Roy mentioned policing. One of the things that I talked about during my swearing-in speech back on July 2nd was talking about ways to explore what reimagining policing would look like moving into the 21st century. And then in early August at a council retreat, I actually said that, look, I'm going to be forming a public safety advisory task force to talk about what the future of policing looks like in the city of Tempe, but frankly, regionally. And so, Roy and I had been having conversations that entire time, and I had, telegraphed that it was something that I wanted to do. But then he was one of the first, two people that I spoke to when I talked about forming this task force because of the work that he does with the East Valley NAACP. And I said, look, if I form this, I would like for you to serve on this because frankly, it's an issue that you're extremely knowledgeable about, you're passionate about, and you're connected to people both in boardrooms and, as he said, both and in the streets. And so he had a foot in every world and really had a good handle on where people were at and frankly, what a lot of members of the community were asking for when it comes to reform. So, he's now on a 22 or 23 member task force in a 6-meeting series, advising not just myself, but our new interim police chief, Jeff Glover, our city manager, Andrew Ching, about what policing should look like in Tempe and frankly, the Valley moving forward. So, but I knew if I was talking about these things during the course of my campaign or during my election night speech, and I didn't follow through on the things that I was talking about, Roy and I have the kind of relationship where he would have picked up the phone and called me and said, hey, we heard what you said, but we're not seeing any movement. So there was definitely going to be movement on my end because not only do I respect him as a friend and a confidant, but I also know that as mayor, I have a bigger responsibility and he has to hold me accountable to make sure that I'm doing the things that I said that I'm going to do. And so now he's working alongside me to talk about what the future might look like with regard to policing in Tempe moving forward.
And so there's a couple of things that I'm hearing in what's being said. One is that I feel like we're almost suggesting that a solution to apathy is actually relationship building, right? So because then that creates the process for accountability, right? That creates the opportunity for somebody to demonstrate, right, that they care about you, or in another way, to demonstrate that they don't care about you and it was just lip service, but then at least right? But if you abstain, right, if you don't participate in the process, right, you will never know. There's a question that's coming in from the audience. Give me one second. That relates, right? The other thing I would say too that y'all talked about is pick your issue, right? Pick your issue that you are interested in, and let that be the entryway. It's by design who we have here on this panel, right? That we have the mayor, that we have the president of the East Valley NAACP, that we have a faculty member and a student. And that's because leadership exists at all of these various levels. So the question that came in from the audience is, all right, I'm going to present it. I don't have any other information besides what it says. What does the concept of social equity mean to you? It's a big question. So Mike, thank you. Yeah. What does the concept of social equity mean to you? Who would like to take that?
Well, I'll break it down just in what I'm hearing, because equity is something of value. Social is in the society. How do you have value in society? One, you got to show up. Unfortunately, it's not just enough to be a human being. We should say, well, I'm a human being and I have value. I matter, right? Yeah, you do. But at the same time, you got to show up. And as our mayor said, Mayor Wood said, in a number of cases, there are a number of people that do not want to see me walk through their doors. I mean, I'm just saying, it's true. There are a number of people that do not want to see me walk through their doors.
We can't imagine why, Roy.
And so the point is that as I feel like it's working when, what do they say about boxing? Corey boxed a couple times, and I've watched him train. But they say that the regiment of the boxer is exposed on the night of the fight. So it's the training, it's the jogging, it's the weightlifting, it's what you do behind the scenes, right? That only gets exposed on the night of the fight. Everybody doesn't see all of the back what happens in the background. And so social equity, I would say, is meeting with your police chief, knowing who your city council members are, knowing who your mayor is, knowing who the sheriff is, knowing who your state and local districts are, your legislative districts. Are you a PC, a political precinct committee person? All of these. See, if you're like, what is he talking about? See, I'm giving you things that help create social equity, right? Are you a member of the NAACP, the Urban League, Young Professionals, Black Lives Matter, your Black Student Union, your educational major cohort? Are you a member? Are you engaged? Where do you spend your time? That's how you engage and build up social equity.
I'm going to bring in the Collins, and Diana, I'm going to ask you to kind of, for sure, get us started on what this concept of social equity means to you, because you highlighted, right, some of the groups that you represent, and even maybe if you want to even put it towards health issues and health policy that you educate the community about.
Well, I always have to bring it to health, right? It is who I am. But for me, what social equity would mean to me is that I don't have members of my community not coming to the doctors because their doctors don't look like them, and they're afraid to go to the doctor that doesn't look like them because they don't think they'll understand what they're going through. It looks to me that I don't have youth in the LGBTQ community committing suicide because they're not accepted in their community. They're not accepted walking down the street. All right. That's what it means to me. It means that we can go out and be who we are in our authentic selves without being persecuted, without being judged. All right. And that goes with walking into a church as well. Okay, we have everyone out here preaching that they're Christians, they're Catholic, and yes, we all have our own moral standings, but when it impacts the health of a community, it impacts the health of an individual, I have a problem with that. That's not social equity to me. That's not equity on any level to me. So, yeah, for me, it starts with being health, wellness, and being able to be your authentic self.
Thank you. Yes. You're wanting to jump in, Daniel, or you're just not?
Social equity to me means the abolition of inherently restrictive, policies and procedures. So for me, equity would be like the abolition of prisons and, the release of prisoners and the reclamation of them into society, right? To be able to rehabilitate all of our members of our communities instead of discarding them and relegating them to other places, because in that it creates a hierarchy in the community, whether we recognize it or not. And there can't be equity if there's a hierarchy. Somebody always feels like they're being stepped on or in the servant class, and I don't believe in that at all. So I feel like equity is busting down all of those doors and creating something completely new that encompasses us all.
Thank you. Yeah, that really speaks to my heart. Corey, do you want to jump in here before we move along to another question?
Sure. I mean, to me, social equity just means that it's fairness. It's the perspective that anyone in our society, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your religious background, your socioeconomic status, anything, that you have the ability to advance without having, unnecessary and unfair obstacles and barriers put in your place. But I think that's honestly what we should all be striving for each and every day. It's something that I think about every day when I get out of bed and go to work, is how do I make this a more fair, just, equitable society for anyone who wants to live in the city of Tempe or who wants to live in the Valley. And as long as I'm moving towards that point or that place, I think that I'm doing my job effectively. So that's what social equity means to me.
Beautiful. I appreciate, just how I can feel our energy, right? How energized we are and how much we're trying to convey that to our audience in a real authentic way, because we all care about the issues that we're representing. I do want to, speak to those, some of the challenges or some of our fears, right? It's a hope and fear series, so we can't just only talk about one side of this. So I want to ask the panelists, what are some of your fears as it relates to the Black community, as it relates to civic engagement? You're welcome to go in any direction that you would like with that question, and whomever would like to start.
I think my biggest fear is even going beyond just the Black community, but it's just the division in the country right now is what concerns me. I was actually having lunch with a good friend today. I'll tell Roy later because Roy knows who it is. They're friends too. But I was having lunch with a friend of mine who's a Republican, and we were just having a conversation about a whole bunch of different items, and saying that like this kind of conversation is becoming increasingly rare, where people who are on opposite sides of the political aisle are able to sit down and have a conversation about issues where we're not hurling insults at one another or demeaning someone or talking about their lack of intelligence. We really were able to talk about a lot of things from, healthcare policy to housing affordability, to a whole number of things. And we were able to have a very civilized yet candid, frank discussion. And I just think that, we're getting to a place now where people are all kind of going to their own neutral corners. And it becomes, I only want to hang out with people who believe exactly what I believe. And I don't want to interact with people who don't, agree with me. So certain people watch the same news network all the time, or they hang out with only the same group of friends. And then they even begin to believe that no one else has a different opinion because they're only hanging out with people that they've basically pre-selected who agree with them on everything, or the TV channel that just, simply spouts back the thoughts that they already believe. And so, that's my biggest concern. It's frankly just the division and the polarization that we're currently experiencing in this country that I believe, during my adult life at least, is sort of at record levels. And I would like to see regardless of what the outcome of the election is next Tuesday evening, that people find a way to begin to come back together. And we have a way of sitting down and working out some of these big problems without yelling or shouting, that we're actually working to make progress.
If anyone else would like to follow up and jump in, what are your fears and your concerns?
For me, my fears are really about mainly family, health, and possible infringement on freedoms that have already been infringed upon. But I guess to me, the political thing one way or the other doesn't really have an effect on me. I live with it constantly, so it's not like it's been any different since I've been here. So, you kind of just take it and run with it. But my family is really important to me, and knowing that there's, other health crises out there besides COVID that aren't being covered, like high blood pressure, diabetes, and other things that affect communities, mental health even. And that, we're just kind of being told to kind of go with it, or essentially run yourself into the ground, trying to keep your family afloat financial wise. So that and being safe, with my family members and probably all of our family members having to go back to work and navigate, it's a thin line between safety and recklessness, and, trying not to be judgmental, but being open is kind of hard as well. So, just being there for everybody and understanding what the day-to-day lives that they have to go through.
Yeah. That right there.
Yeah.
No, my fear, is all about equity. It really is. That's something that I champion, and it's something that I would love to see, but my fear is that I'm not going to see it. I'm not, because of this divide that we continue to have. And as long as we continue to have this divide within parties, within healthcare, within decision-making processes, it's going to continue. And I don't know. I don't want to be scared when I'm running down, trying to work out in the morning and I'm passing someone. I don't want to be scared that, they think I'm trying to run them down or something like that. I would like that to go away and have that divide be gone. So, what Mayor Corey was saying, I totally feel that. That's my fear, that this is not going to change.
I would say my fear is a little bit of success will make people fall back into complacency. And that they will, or that we will, try to fall back into normal without working to create the new normal with the new set of circumstances that we have to endure and encounter, not just politically, but also we are still enduring a pandemic. We have to navigate the impact of the pandemic from those that have been affected, for those that have lost loved ones and have not yet been able to grieve the loss of their loved ones, to students who are not able to go to school or haven't been able to go to school, or they've fallen behind. There's been a bit of a gap from, because I believe it was spring break of 2020, when schools kind of shut down and they tried to do some things virtually. And it was just like, I think a lot of teachers began to give up. A lot of students began to give up. So it's going to be, and thinking about those in their junior or senior years, who were thinking about going to college, and now maybe they're second guessing that. So there's a new normal that we're going to have to endure all the way around. And so I hope that we don't get too caught up in the celebration or in celebrating a little bit of success to forget the big picture, and we forget about a lot of hurting people out there, or people that have been left behind.
And I agree with you actually, Roy, that one of the challenges of the fact that we're still, predominantly, primarily at home, is that we're not having that social contact and those connections to kind of feel or experience the greater impact of our decisions, right, or lack of it. So yeah, we can't see what our decisions are doing or the impact that's being created, and that's a challenge, whether it's enrolling in school, right? Whether it's voting, whether it's kind of speaking out on all the issues you all are representing. And we're feeling that even in our campus. And that's not just Chandler-Gilbert, but nationwide, right? A reduction of enrollment of students, and concerns about like, well, where are they going, right? If are they working? At what point are they being engaged? That actually brings this conversation brings us to another question brought forth by the audience. I'm going to read this, but let me preface with the question. So there's explanation and the question. So the question is reaching out enough to help bring honor back? And let me give you the explanation. I think the anger and apathy comes because people see that those who have power are not playing by the rules. They see the lack of honor. So, question, is reaching out enough to help bring honor back? And we're all taking it in. Yeah,
I guess. Well, I guess my argument would be, or kind of my response to that would be, I think you have to start somewhere. I think that, it's one conversation at a time, one person at a time, one relationship at a time. And over a period of time of putting whoever you would view as the right people in office by voting and by mobilizing and getting those folks there, but then by, holding those folks accountable to make sure that the things they promised you they were going to do, they actually fulfill. I think that's the best way to go about bringing some of the honor back. I don't think you should ever give anyone in public office blind loyalty. I don't think you should ever get to a place where someone is just like this, just sort of a cult of personality around someone. And it's just, I wouldn't want that for me. I wouldn't want someone to say, I just love Corey Woods and he can frankly do no wrong in my eyes. I mean, that's dangerous. I mean, that means that I can then just do whatever I want and get away with whatever I want, and no one's going to hold my feet to the fire. I tell people, I would ask that you hold me accountable. If you've got a question about something, email me, text me, call me, but make sure that you're expressing what your concerns are so I can actively try to address them. And that's the other thing too. I think we have to even, just as residents, because granted, I'm the mayor of a city, but I have other elected officials that I vote for myself in seats that I have nothing to do with. And I try to make it very clear, if I'm disappointed in something or I'm concerned that something's going in the wrong direction, I let them know. Because sometimes people will say things to me and they'll go, I'm really upset with you about something that happened a month ago. And I'll say, but why didn't you tell me what was going on? Or why didn't you say something as it was happening? So frankly, that would have shaped my viewpoint. It might have changed my vote. It might have changed the way that I chose to approach something. But it's like, well, I didn't think about asking you. I just got upset. And it's like, if you don't tell me what's going on, I can't address the issue because I don't even know it's a problem. And so I think that both sides have some responsibility there. I think that the elected official in my role has a responsibility to listen to residents and listen to constituents and not get so caught up in in the fancy aspects of being mayor that you just forget about who it is you serve and the fact that you are a public servant. But I think that, the residents or people who live in the city or in the area also have to make sure that they're approaching those elected officials and people in power to say, here's what I want and here's what I'm expecting. So when I go into these meetings and these negotiations, I know exactly what I'm trying to get to, but telling me after it's already done that you're mad at me, I can't change what's already been done.
And I want to contextualize that. So I'm going to put, wear my psychology hat right now and say that you add why it's important to you. Give the context, right? Because out of that context, out of that feeling, right, is why you're fighting, is why you're upset, is maybe even fueling some of the divisiveness, right? So if we just say, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want, right, without providing the context, there's two things that happen. One, we're not going to be able to see that, oh, there is some common interest and common ground. Like, oh, you love your children and you want them to be safe. Like, yeah, I can get down with that. Like, I can hang on to that idea, but it's hard for me to hang on to the idea of you want to vote for this policy without any context around it. People can move forward a bit, more clearly with understanding with context. Collins, and do y'all want to respond to this question? If not, there's other questions flying in.
I think consistency and just showing interest in communities. I feel like what the person is speaking of is just, people fishing for votes, showing their face every once in a blue moon, kind of like passing out turkeys like Nino Brown. But when it comes down time to clean up the neighborhood, there's no one to be found. And the Community Block Association is, policing up the neighborhood. So I feel like if a person is there and they're consistent, they will gain the trust of those people without the person having to say anything. Like, I don't have to question your loyalty if you're down here and I see you're down here. Not you giving me lip service, not you saying nothing else, but you're actually down here trying to help me get my kids on the bus or, figuring out if the street's safe or not. And that's the way I feel about it. I'm all about just showing up and doing it. Let my work speak for, what I stand for. And, as far as looking the part of being the part, it may not be that, but, some representation is better than none. And if you get the community behind you, they really believe in you. Sometimes like you said, man, you can do no wrong. So you kind of got to toe the line with that and keep yourself accountable. And I feel like the honor part comes with, personal integrity too, because there are different types of personalities who do run for public office. And there are people who are unsavory characters, just trying to get into it because of money. And there are people whose hearts are really rooted in it. So, it's a part of it has to deal with the people who are voting and kind of telling the part, seeing if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, then kick them out. But I agree with you.
Yeah, Diana, just making room. If not, I can, so I would almost say too, to kind of give a summary to that question, is reaching out enough to help bring honor back? I think we're saying no. I think that it's also about the action and the accountability, again, rooting back to who you know, the relationships, holding folks accountable for their actions or lack of them. Okay.
I also wanted to just add a bit more of an example, because I believe that we had to do that as men when women were speaking up around the Me Too movement and sharing, and they displayed the courage to tell their stories. And so it wasn't just enough to say, okay, we hear your story, but no, it was, we have to say her name. We need to believe her. Men had to begin to check other men when they saw I was about to say something that probably wouldn't have been academic, the dumb stuff that would happen, and we had to check it, and if you weren't, and the point was, if you weren't checking it, you were just as complicit when you saw the behavior. And so I believe the same thing should happen in race. If you see racist behavior and you're not checking it, you're complicit. If you see the political abuse that will damage your party or your political office, then and even though it's not you, if you're not willing to stand up and speak out against it, you are complicit. So I think that's where we see the honor come back. When a person's willing to take a risk, and even lose their seat or lose an endorsement, lose their money, lose whatever to do what's right, per se, by the people.
And I think even more so, when you're like right now, what you're doing as a man is you're leveraging your privilege, right? You are leveraging your privilege from the group who, with this particular issue, is generally the benefactor, right, of the system of oppression, to say, hey, no, that system needs to change, right? We're going to amplify voices, which is actually how this entire panel, how this entire series came to be. We had an ally in our campus come and say, hey, I want to amplify your voices because I have a certain level of potentially power and privilege, and so I want to highlight the issues of your community. So like that's just such a good example, right? You just did right now, Roy. Anyone else want to jump in, or can I move on to another topic? Okay. So I'm gonna Mayor Woods you now because I've been coring you this whole time, like we're best friends. Okay. So the question's for you. They're addressing you as Mayor Woods. What is the city of Tempe doing to look at systemic racism in the Tempe Police Department?
So I would go back to what I mentioned earlier about the Public Safety Advisory Task Force that I convened. That group was convened for the purpose of talking about use of force policies, de-escalation, the mental health and well-being of our officers, just a whole bunch of items. And so, frankly, with the death of George Floyd in May, our entire world changed. All of a sudden, conversations that people were not willing to have before, people all across this country began to have. And so my perspective was we needed to start having that conversation in Tempe proactively. And so that conversation, that we're having right now with relation to that task force, where we've got over 20 plus members that are looking at all of those things. So the first meeting, actually, if you want to go back and take a look at it, it's online. There's a lot of conversation there, regarding what kind of data are we collecting? Are we splitting that data out by race when it comes to traffic stops and other types of situations? What's our recruitment look like with the police department? Are we recruiting, people of color? And there were so many great questions that came up during the course of that 3-hour session. And frankly, that's a lot of the discussion that we are beginning to have, and that this group is really delving into is how does the police department currently operate? Do all the different groups within our community feel comfortable with where we currently are? And if not, what kinds of steps can we take together to move forward to make sure that everyone truly does feel safe and feel protected? But there's other initiatives even going outside of simply talking about the police department. There's another initiative that was started right before I became mayor called the Right to Breathe Initiative. And that also was about not just simply talking about the police department, but it was talking about every department within the city of Tempe? And are we truly looking at everything through an equity lens? You know, when we look at not just hiring in the police department, but what's the hiring look like in Tempe Fire and Medical Rescue? What does the hiring look like in the Water Utilities Department? What does the hiring look like in community services? And so we really are frankly looking at all of those things, not just simply the police department, but we're looking at the entire city from that perspective about what are we doing well and what areas could we frankly stand to have some improvement in. And I was actually really happy about a couple of weeks ago, the Arizona Republic wrote an article, you know, talking about some of the conversations the city of Tempe was having, like the Public Safety Task Force, like the Right to Breathe Initiative, like a lot of our work with Equity in Action, where they said, you know, a lot of folks said, hey, look, you know, is Tempe perfect, or is any city in the Valley perfect? No. But the city of Tempe at least is taking proactive steps to have conversations that a lot of other communities, frankly, aren't willing to even have. You know, the notion of calling, you know, 20 plus members of the community to get together to talk about what does reimagining policing look like for the 21st century, there'd be a lot of folks, frankly, in my position who wouldn't want to have that conversation because they might be concerned about what feedback they might get. But my perspective was, that feedback is important. It's not just about me sitting by myself with a notepad writing up what I think might work. It's about truly taking the pulse of the temperature of various members of our community from different backgrounds and figuring out how we want to move forward together. Because only from my perspective, by having that conversation, can we come together around a shared set of values. Because otherwise, you know, we're going to continue to remain divided. And we don't, and I said, I want to make sure that, you know, in my role as mayor, I'm contributing to bringing people together, not furthering division. And the fact that even our police department, that 3 folks from the department, our new interim chief, Jeff Glover, our assistant chief, Mike Pooley, and our union president from the Tempe Officers Association, Sergeant Rob Ferraro, are taking part in that conversation is also great. I think it says a lot to, we're getting a lot of support from our own police department to say, we recognize that we do a lot of things very well, but there are areas that we even recognize where we can also make improvements. So we want to be part of that conversation with members of the community, talking about how we develop a plan so we can move forward together.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's such a good example of what, you know, all the other groups that we represent, the other institutions that we represent, right? A system or a model for ways to evaluate a system. I'm mindful of time.
If I can make a quick sentence on this. When Corey was sworn in, or when Mayor Woods was sworn in, I pretty much told him there were a number of police officers that needed to go. Let me just say that. So when we talk about systemic racism, we already knew that there were, we as the NAACP already knew that there were some problematic officers in the department, and the mayor began to address all of those things.
That's a very lovely follow-up sentence. Okay. No, I'm laughing because it's such support, you know, for Mayor Woods, and that's again even more.
But I'm like, this is real time. I'm telling you the truth, and the story is in real time. And unfortunately, many people just don't get to hear it. You know, so many of the students, many of your viewers may be hearing a lot of this for the first time. So I hope that we can, I think, you know, Mayor Woods, make sure they get the links so they can see some of these meetings that we've participated in.
No, it's good.
Go ahead.
No, you guys are building each other up. Go ahead. Huh?
No, and as a matter of fact, just, you know, on that point to Michael's question and to, you know, Roy's comment, you know, the first meeting is online, 3 hours if you've got some time to watch it. But the second meeting is actually, it's a public meeting. It's going to be held virtually due to COVID, but it's going to be from 4 to 7 p.m. And there's an opportunity for public comment, and you can watch the entire meeting on a live stream. And if you miss it, we will put it back up on the internet, and you can go back and watch it later if you don't have time to watch it in real time. But really, I mean, that's our commitment to transparency, frankly, and making sure that the public, you know, sees and hears the conversations that are taking place in advance of this group presenting along with our staff, a plan to our city manager and to the police chief in January of 2021.
Perfect. So this is actually, there's a question coming in from the audience that I think we can relates and we can use to kind of spin off. The question is, does the city offer resources and or programming for white people to help work for racial justice? But I want to open that question up even beyond, beyond the city, really to everyone, for the institutions that you represent. Are there any resources or programming for white people to help work towards racial justice? And is that your job?
So I would say yes. I mean, there are, and I had a meeting last week with a couple of members of our Tempe Black Association within the city of Tempe. We had a great conversation, and they talked about the fact is, like, while the organization was founded as a way for Black employees to come together and talk about some of their shared needs within our city's infrastructure, the group is open to anyone who wants to join. And not all of the members of that employee organization are Black. They've got members from all different backgrounds, just people who frankly inquired to the folks who started it and said, hey, look, we know we may not be Black, but frankly, we're interested in having conversations about race and about being allies to the community. And so they are part of those discussions, and they are actively helping to be thought partners when it comes to changing certain things internally within the city. And so all of those different organizations, whether it's our Black Association or other groups, are all open to anyone, regardless of what race you happen to be. And so, right, if there's a person in the city of Tempe who happens to be white, but they want to be involved in working on issues that that Black employees at the city of Tempe say is specifically important to them, they absolutely can go to those meetings or join that group and take an active role in those conversations and be an ally.
I would also welcome them to join the East Valley NAACP. They can do that.
And how do they do that? I'm assuming they can go online. What's the best route?
They can go to evnaacp.org and become a member. It puts you in connection with the national NAACP, which sends out a ton of information. But it can also plug you in to our organization and the inner workings and the work that we do here in the Valley. I get that. I say that because I remember going to a number of events early on in my presidency, and there were white people that said, can white people join the NAACP? I say, absolutely. White people can join the NAACP. And I said it loud too, so everybody could hear what they asked. But I also wanted to dispel the myth that only Black people could be a part of the NAACP.
And I want to open it up right to the Collins, if you have any response to, again, I think a larger question of kind of whose responsibility, right, is it? That's the question I've added, right? Whose responsibility is it, to help our white folks understand and work towards racial equity or racial justice? Do you have any comments on that?
As far as whose responsibility, I guess I feel like it's everybody's, well, not quite everybody's responsibility. A certain part of it is hard to communicate, but only to a certain extent. Like, I don't feel like I should placate, my everyday struggles just to explain, why something is unjust. I feel like, a part of it is you should just believe what I say. And another part of it is, it's pretty obvious if you open your eyes and look at statistics and stuff. It's not like this is it's something that's new. So, I feel kind of on the, you can figure it out and find which organization, or even just starting your own community. There's homeowners associations that are still racist. There's, redlining communities and other policies, that could be worked on that are just inherently racist as is, or they have language. And so I teeter the line, but there are resources out there. There are plenty of authors who are out there. I know Jane, I don't want to say Goodall, but I know that's not her name. Jane, Jane Elliott, and many other scholars who are out there who can explain the struggles of the people, so you can catch up a little bit, so you don't come to your friendly neighborhood Black person be like, well, hey, I want to understand your struggle, because we may not be as friendly in the streets.
Very true.
Yeah, and and I'll own the part that I added, of one of like consideration for who's doing the emotional labor, right, of the education. I think that has been a welcome conversation in this past year, right, regarding how we are to become educated, right? So ensuring that you're not asking those individuals who are fighting maybe some of the most difficult battles to then also teach, making sure that you're taking on some of the responsibility for yourself. And like you said, Daniel, right, coming to the space informed. And at least, think about it from a student perspective, at least, coming to the space of like, this is what I don't know. These are the gaps, as opposed to I'm the sponge and the receptacle, kind of fill me up with all the information.
Yeah, that's the best way to take it, because if somebody tries to explain your experience, but you already have a perception of it, then it just goes nowhere. So I like your analogy a lot.
Yes, and Jane Goodall, now we're talking about, that's this anthropologist, it's Jane Elliott, and the educator, yes, we were getting confused. Okay, I'm gonna ask one final question to kind of bring it in from our preset of questions. How do you all rejuvenate? So I feel a certain level of excitement just speaking with all of you, and so this is rejuvenating in and of itself, but how do you refuel yourself to do this work?
I bought a bike, and I'll say, sometimes I'll take a ride, and just I try not to get hit by cars, not realizing like, wow, this was not a thought when I was a kid riding a bike, and maybe that's why my mother yelled at me so much. But getting out, riding a bike, doing something to get your mind off of things. You can put your headphones in, play your music. It's a great way to engage. And also, I found myself enjoying the work. And so when having meetings, like meeting with the mayor, and talking about some of the ideas, and then getting a call from him a couple of days later and say, okay, I talked to this person or this committee about what we talked about, and here's what we're going to do with that. That to me rejuvenates me. Seeing some of the ideas that we've talked about and discussed, whether over coffee or over the phone or over chat, then begin to turn into reality. So that begins to become sort of a self-perpetuating mechanism, if I may say. So there are a couple of ways to do that.
Sure. Yeah, the progress fuels you. Yeah. Others of you.
I work out. That's sort of my way of trying to deal with whatever stress or burdens may come upon me, from the nature of really having at this point 2 full-time jobs, and and also having a life now that's so public that you think you can, get a weekend to yourself, but the next thing you know, people are tagging you in Facebook posts or Instagram posts because something happened and they need you to respond to it. So you're never really off the clock. And so it becomes really, really hard. I mean, my father tells me stories all the time about, when I was young, even before like pagers. He's like, I could take you to a baseball game. And at the point that I left the office, that was my time to be with my son and to just spend time with you and be your father. He said, now, you can't ever turn the cell phone off. It's always the social media, the cell phone, someone's texting. And, so I find that for me, working out is a good way to have a lot more natural energy and to relieve stress. I tend to watch a lot of TV too, and whatever, spare time I actually have. But then it's also just spending time with people that I really enjoy being around and people that frankly rejuvenate me. Sometimes a really thought-provoking conversation is what really helps to rejuvenate me and kind of make me hopeful for the next day and for the next week. So I know those are some of the ways that I kind of use to stay sane and be prepared, to go out there every week and help other people.
Wonderful.
If I may jump in real quick, one of the funnest rejuvenating self-care incidents that Corey and I have had together was this was at the beginning of quarantine. We didn't know what it was going to look like, but we found ourselves both watching a virtual versus battle. And it turned into an online, people were following us as we were talking about the battle, so it turned into this viral online discussion. Which one was it?
It was right?
Right.
Yeah, we were on just watching, and it was fun. I was racing home to watch this, and I noticed that that Roy was also online and he was talking about it. So the whole thing, for anyone watching who's not familiar with the versus battles, I mean it's 20 tracks by each artist, and they just kind of go head to head for about probably a good 2 hours. And Roy and I were just online going back and forth, creating threads, talking about, what do we think about that song? And did it beat the previous song? And there were people, just jumping on the thread going, I can't believe the president of the East Valley NAACP and the mayor of Tempe go back and forth about two of the most iconic hip hop producers, ever. But that was a really rejuvenating conversation. I think it also gave people a chance to see Roy and I when we're not necessarily doing the work that we're always doing, but to see us as full human beings. Again, these are just, they're working on behalf of the people, but they're also just regular guys, who have a mutual shared love for hip hop and culture.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's a good example. Diana and Daniel.
Wow. Yeah, it's really hard for me to rejuvenate because I'm always busy lately. And one of the things that I finally started taking up was running. I don't like to run. I was in the military as well. And those 2-mile runs and those 5K marches, I hate them. But I find that with everything that I am doing, being out in the community, working, being with the students, I need that release. So I just run. I just run until I get tired and circle my way back. Next thing you know, it's 4 miles, 5 miles, and an hour has gone by, or 2 hours gone by, and I've just cleared my head and left it all out on the road or the path wherever I was running. And that seems to be very helpful. And I do feel different, and I do feel the difference when I don't do it. And I also started meditating a little bit and trying to recenter all that energy that I put out, because, as I tell my students and I tell my patients, you can't give from an empty well. So at some point you have to refuel it. And it does mean taking time and actually saying no and doing what you need to do for yourself and for your family.
Yeah. I meditate as well, and I work out, but I don't run. I got one of those Airdyne bikes. So like I do something like I work out in my garage, so body weight, and then I use that bike, and man, it wears me out enough. So I use that. I also listen to a lot of audiobooks in place of like I may listen to news podcasts and all of that, but audiobooks are really where it's at. So I've been listening to a lot of inspiring stories, about people who kind of made it through certain things. For free at that. I use the library's resources. So I'll plug that in. If anybody has a library card, there's free apps that you can use that you don't have to spend your money on to listen to free audiobooks, other types of media, just to kind of get yourself out there. And that's helped me a lot, especially with overthinking and getting through certain work processes during the day. So I find that audiobooks and fitness have been a huge help.
Nice. And that's actually, I think here in this pandemic, right, this venue, this platform, right, this way of communicating existed before, but we're relying on it and we're utilizing it even more through these live feeds, right, through, like you said, Daniel, the podcast. And I know I'm encouraged by it. I'm encouraged that it's our voices, right, that are getting out there, and that now we have the ability to pick the voice that we want to hear, the voice that represents us or looks like us. Okay. So I'm going to give you all the opportunity to just kind of make any final statements as we exit out. What is your last word, your final word for our community?
I'll say we got 7 days to engage, get your vote counted. If you have not voted, make sure that your friends, your mama, your cousins, aunties, grandma, make sure everybody gets their vote counted. But on top of that, after that, it's not over. You still need to be engaged and find one thing. We said it. Find one thing that you're passionate about and stay there and figure out how you can get involved and engage on a local level.
I would say very much the same thing. We've got, basically less than a week left. And I agree with Roy. It's probably the most pivotal presidential election, if not in our lifetimes, but definitely in my lifetime. And so I would tell people, if you haven't already voted, to make sure to do that, to, do some research on the candidates before you vote, to make sure that whoever you're voting for aligns with your positions and, frankly, issues that you want to see remain at the forefront. And I even tell folks sometimes, when I'm talking to young people who are 18, 19 years old, they've just registered for the first time. Sometimes they'll say, Corey, I don't know some of these positions on the ballot. I'll say, you can call me. I'm more than happy to exchange emails or text messages or talk to you on the phone and talk to you about, who, what I might think might be good. But frankly, learning more about you and what your interests and your needs are, and trying to align you with the candidate who's most likely to serve those needs. So for me, participating in our democracy is one of the most critical things I think that we can do. And we've got less than a week left. And I would urge anyone to make sure that you cast a ballot and make sure your voice is heard on November 3rd.
Diana, Daniel.
I just say, stay activated. Don't let that fire die once you get what you want or you see what you want being done. All right. So much has happened in the past that we stay fired up and then we get a little bit of result and then we let the fire die down. So we need to just stay on it and just keep on it, because that's the only way we're going to see and keep that change.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I come from a different angle, so I just figure keep enjoying your life and don't forget about the positives. It's kind of easy to kind of get micro focused on everything that's happening and feeling like the world's going to come to an end, but it hasn't happened yet. And just take it a day at a time. I speak from people who haven't been able to make it to this day. Today is one of actually my battle buddy's anniversaries. He was killed in action today about 10 years ago. So, I speak from those who can't be here, but, have sacrificed. So just take your days, enjoy them, enjoy your families, and be grateful that you're here and, live to fight another day. It's not over, so.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, I appreciate that reframe. Yeah, and I just want to add that, I'm a huge advocate of rest. I take naps often. But I would say that actually right now is not exactly the time to rest, right? Yes, as Daniel eloquently said, place this time in history, this moment in history within context, right? There is much more that's happened, going to happen and going to come. There's much more that's happened in the past, right? But it's not the time to rest. It is the time to kind of access your community, to access family members, and to help people become engaged in this process. Additionally, for those who can't vote, right, we've spoken to those who are incarcerated, those who are undocumented, right? There's lots of reasons why people can't engage our voting system. You can still connect, right? You can still connect with people like Mayor Woods, right? You can still connect with people in your community and have them advocate for you. We will close out tonight's session. I want to say thank you to Mayor Woods, thank you to Mr. Tatum, thank you to Professor Collins and Mr. Collins for your leadership, for really, honestly, I'll say for me, for the pleasure that I've had in speaking to you, but also igniting me, right, kind of firing me up. I'm sure that you have done that for our audience. And go out and vote in this coming week. send in your ballot, get informed, and bring others along with you. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful night.